Well, hello everyone. It is a pleasure to be here today. One of my favorite things about fall is going out to lunch at work. Can you hear me okay? Is it too much? Okay. So last week, I went out to lunch and had a lunch appointment with somebody I had never met before, and was driving over, and I was scheduled for an hour. Got over there and got introduced to the individual, and it's one of those lunches that you know, you just know as soon as you sit down it's going to be a great conversation. And I got engaged, and for an hour lunch, we didn't even order lunch for 30 minutes, we just talked. And then we did get lunch, and we had our lunch and continued our discussion, talking about, gosh, our wives and how blessed we were to be married to them for so long, and our children, and getting them educated. And boy, will they have the same future and the same opportunity as we will, or as we did, and so just all kinds of things. And it was one of those lunches where time just evaporates. And so it goes past the hour, and it goes to an hour and 15, an hour and a half, an hour and 45, and I could feel my cell phone was in my pocket and it was on vibrate. And I could feel it going boom, 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 and I knew it was my assistant back at work going, "Where are you?" But I was really enjoying my lunch. That individual is Sam Hayes. And Sam, you were an inspiration to me at that lunch. And he is a Blue Key brother from Emporia State. And we left inspired. And Nan and I are looking forward to getting to know you and Jeannene, and hopefully, you know, furthering that relationship. We also discussed the possibility, we would like to donate a scholarship and endow a scholarship to be given away at this lecture series year after year from here on out. So if that's okay with you, I'd like to have Nan contact Jeannene, and maybe they can take care of the details, and work with Pam and with Tim, and we'll endow a scholarship. So every year at this lecture series, we'll give away a scholarship for an individual thinking about coming to the other special guests, my wife, Nan Smith, is here. Nan is an Emporia State graduate, the love of my life, and every year just gets better with her. And one of the blessings that I've had coming to Emporia State was meeting her, and we got married shortly after we graduated, and it's just been a great thing. My parents are here. Both of my parents are Emporia State grads, and it's a pleasure to have them come down. Tom and Barbara Stevens, Nan's folks, they're not Emporia State grads, they're Drury grads, but they put 2 kids through Emporia State, and we appreciate that very much. My sister Patty, who is an Emporia State grad, and her husband, so it's a pleasure to have you come down. We also have our interim vice president, Dr. Ed Flingy, here. I appreciate you coming out very much. We also have our former Lieutenant Governor of Kansas, Gary Shearer. Gary, I saw you here earlier. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate that. And then we have our Kansas State Senator, Jeff Longbine. Jeff, thanks for making the time to come out and see our presentation, and it's a pleasure to have you here. Tim, can I get a glass of water? Okay, I started all my presentations, unfortunately for you, with a little joke. And at work, they always rate my jokes on a scale of 1 to 10. I never get a 10, of course. I usually get about a 6 or 7. So when individuals come to B.E. Smith and they join, there's an orientation, and I get to give the orientation. And I also teach the class on sales and selling B.E. Smith and our products and our services. So what I decided today was I'm going to tell you my favorite sales joke that I tell to our sales team. And it goes like this. There's this nun, and she's getting ready to take a shower. So she slips off her robe, and she's getting in the shower, and the doorbell rings. And she thinks, oh my gosh. She thinks, well, I'll speak to them through the door, no big deal. So she runs out there, and she says, who is it? And she hears a voice from the other side of the door, and the voice says, I'm a blind salesperson. And she thinks, well, no big deal. So she opens the door, and he says, ma'am, would you like to buy some blinds? So my story has 3 chapters today. Chapter 1, Jack Mallon, 708 Peyton Street. Chapter 2, born at Emporia State University. And Chapter 3, the American Dream. Jack Mallon, 708 Peyton. Let me tell you what I know about Jack Mallon. Jack Mallon was born in the late 1800s, I believe 1886, and he was born in England. And at the time, England was experiencing lots of prosperity. However, prosperity had not found its way to Jack's home. Jack had 3 brothers, had a mom and dad, but the dad was an alcoholic. And we know from that disease that tears families apart, and it was tearing his family apart. Jack's dad had trouble keeping a job, so he tried self-employment. That didn't work out, so his company goes bankrupt. Tries it again, company goes bankrupt again. So next thing Jack knows, him and his 3 brothers and his mom are on a boat coming over to the United States of America. So they left England, they left the dad, and came up here to start anew. And Jack's mom had a sister that had done the same thing, and she ended up in Arkansas, and that's where Jack ended up. And Jack's mom met a fellow there, and they got married, sure enough. And unfortunately for Jack, him and his mom's new husband wasn't working. And apparently he was a fire and brimstone Christian and believed that you should be reading the Bible all the time, and particularly all day on Sunday, and if you didn't, there was a whooping involved. And so Jack left his home at a very young age. And then there's a period of time where we lose Jack, and we're not sure what happens to him. But we pick the story back up years later when Jack is living in Emporia, Kansas, and he's working for the Santa Fe Railroad. So in his time in Emporia, Jack meets a lady, Faye Tweedy, and they get married and they move out to 708 Peyton Street. Now let me tell you a little bit about how they ran 708 Peyton Street, because it was like this the whole time that my family owned that house. Even clear out the Depression, even through the Depression, their feeling at 708 Peyton was this: if you were hungry, we've got an extra potato in the pot. If you were weary, you know what? We have a spare bedroom upstairs with fresh linens on it. Go take a rest. They were known as kind and generous, hardworking, and if you were related to them, you felt a little special because of that. Well, Jack and Faye Mallon, were my great-grandparents. 708 Peyton, of course, here in Emporia, was out on the edge of town at the time. 5-bedroom house, big house, okay? And from that house came this whole string of successes. And a lot of it moved through Emporia State University. Jack had 3 daughters, and they were known as the 3 sisters of 708 Peyton. And I tell you, they were a piece of work now. They still have a reputation in this community to this day. Mildred, Audrey, and Maureen. Well, Mildred met a man who was going to Kansas State Teachers College, and he wanted to become a teacher. And at that day, in that day and age, you know what? Lawyer, doctor, teacher, right? So he really kind of introduced a level of education into the Mallon family, and that stayed with us. He got his bachelor's and he got his master's here, and he planned on teaching. He met Mildred, they got married, and they had a child, Pauline Craig. So we got Bernie and we have Mildred, they have a child, it's Pauline. And Pauline ends up wanting to be a teacher also and ends up enrolling in Kansas State Teachers College. This is a picture of Mildred and Bernie and my mom on the footsteps of the administration building at Kansas State Teacher College with the president of the university then, Dr. John King. Well, Pauline Craig meets her boyfriend, or meets a boyfriend at school, and marries him. His name is B.E. Smith, and he's here in the middle. He got here because his brother was here on a football scholarship, and therefore B.E. Smith, or Pete, as he was known at the time, decided he'd come to Emporia State. So he met Pauline Craig, I'm sorry. They got married and became B.E. and Pauline Smith, and those are my folks. You can see my picture on the upper right-hand side. My dad and mom, they had 4 children, 2 of which came to Emporia State. Me and my sister, Patty Smith, who's here today, we started going to school here. I met my wife here, Nan. She's here today, of course. Patty's here. Patty's husband, John Hart, has got a degree from Emporia State. And then just this last spring, my niece graduated from Emporia State. So that home at 708 Peyton brought many an individual through Emporia State University, and that's not going to stop. That's going to keep going. And our family, Emporia State University, has a great reputation. Now, out at 708 Peyton Street, this is what it looked like. This is Jack and Faye Mal for their 50th wedding anniversary. This is my mom and dad at the same house, out on the porch. And then here's Nan and I coming out after our graduation. We both got our master's degrees. When I came to Emporia State, I moved in the bedroom right above the porch there. And I never thought of moving into the dorms. In fact, I called my aunt, Maureen Mal, who was running the place. Jack and Faye had passed on. And it wasn't 2 or 3 days before school was supposed to start. And I called her and I said, well, I'm thinking about coming down there and going to college. Would you mind if I stayed with you for a while? And she went through the roof, and she said, when will you be here? I'll throw an extra potato in the pot. And so I moved down, got enrolled, and the activity at 708 Peyton just kept going. In fact, true story, every Sunday we would have a big dinner at 708 Peyton, and I would have a lot of friends over that would come over, and it could be 10, could be 12. I mean, we had the house packed, and with our relatives, and we would all hang out. In fact, if you had homework, a lot of kids, as they would wake up on Sunday morning, they'd grab their books and come over to 708 Peyton and hang out, and they'd do some homework, and we'd watch football games, and we'd get ready for dinner, and then we'd have usually pot roast and mashed potatoes. And it was funny how it would work, because Sunday morning the phone would just start ringing. Well, are you guys going to have dinner today? Yeah, we're going to have dinner. And, well, I might swing by. Come on by, that'd be great. And true story, when Maureen passed away, she left it in her will, and she named 4 of my best friends from Emporia State to be pallbearers at her funeral. They all came back to school when she died, and were pallbearers for her. But that's the kind of house that we ran at 708 Peyton. And the connection with Emporia State was always very close. Always very close. So when I was preparing for my presentation today, I was wondering, well, what can I say about the university and my time spent there? You know, I've got so many memories. Jogging through the campus on spring or fall days. And I walked to school every day from 708 Peyton. It was exactly a mile. And, but I would jog up and I'd jog through campus and met so many friends here, friends with my professors and Dr. Schulte, and it was just a huge part of my life. But I thought, I'm going to talk today about the takeaways of that experience and how it's helped me be who I am. When I left Emporia State, I was a changed person because of this university. First thing, growing up and finding a higher power. I can remember being a high school student, and all I could think about was getting on my own. By golly, I'm going to move out of this house, and I'm going to be on my own. I'm going to make my own decisions, and life is going to be grand. But we also know that it is grand for a while. But then all of a sudden you got to start facing your demons. And you're responsible for yourself, and you're getting up, even choosing classes, deciding what major you're going to be, determining what your behavior is going to be when it's not supervised. And I can remember in my room above the porch at 708 Peyton when I was a freshman, and I'd been here about 6 weeks or so. And I remember sitting on the couch. I had a couch up in my room, an old one that Maureen had for years, but I sat on that couch, and I remember clasping my hands and bowing my head and saying, you know what, God, I am scared to death. I have no idea what's in store for me. I'm so mixed up on direction and majors and classes, and I can't do this on my own. And right at that time, I did feel blessed. And I got some power there. And I charged right back into school, and I got my wheels, and that stayed with me ever since, and I've made that a practice in my life. And that's something that I feel like I left this university with. It's been very important to me. Another thing is humility. When I was coming to Emporia State, and my friends would ask me, well, where are you going to go to school? Where are you going to go to school? And I would tell them Emporia State. Well, my immediate group of friends in high school were all going to KU. And so here come the jokes. And it's funny, I was having lunch with Sam, of course, and he has had similar experiences. And well, what would you ever go to Emporia State for? It's not even much bigger than our high school. Well, that's not a university. And I didn't know any different. To me, there was only one option my whole life, and that was to go to Emporia State. So I went to Emporia State, and they went to KU, and of course they always slipped in these little jabs, about Iowa beef and the soybean mill and all that. And I was visiting for a football game at KU one year, and I was up in my best buddy's apartment. He was the guy that always ribbed me the most. And I was sitting on his bed in his apartment in the dorm, and I looked up at his books, his business books. Now, they were the same business books that I was studying over at Emporia State. In fact, I got up, and I went over and I grabbed his accounting book. This is a true story. I said, Dave, where are you guys at in this accounting book? It was this exact same one I was studying. So he shows me where they're at in the accounting book. Yeah, we were 3 chapters ahead of him. 3 chapters ahead of him. People that graduate from Emporia State, the students that I went to school with here, the attitude's not here, man. We're just coming to school, we're learning, having a good time, trying to become involved. And the one thing that I have to say that I left Emporia State with was a bit of humility. Funny thing too, my friend that went to KU, and this is a total cheap slam, I remember showing him, this is Kramer Hall in the picture where I did most of my business training. And I took him on a tour of the campus. He was getting a business degree too, and boy, he turned up his nose at that. And I can remember visiting him at KU, and he was showing me their big business hall, and it was intimidating and that sort of thing. But one thing that I've noticed is the years have gone by. I graduated from Emporia State in 1985. The people that I graduated from Emporia State with are every bit as successful as the group that graduated from KU, if not a little bit more so. Now, I know that's a gross overgeneralization, but I'm just telling you what my experience was. Okay. Another interesting thing, I had lunch with him 2 weeks ago, and we had this great conversation going, and he said, hey Doug, here's my resume. Is there a chance I could get a job with your company? And I thought, boy, what a turn of events this is. But anyway, I do feel like I left Emporia State with a degree of humility, and I believe that the individuals that I graduated with are just good, humble people. Not a lot of errors there. Blue Key, I've got several people in the audience that were Blue Key members, none when I was there, but it was a good experience for me. You know, there's so many clubs and social organizations and service organizations and fraternity and sororities. You can get involved in a lot of things here in Emporia State. I got involved with Blue Key. It was a valuable experience to me. Taught me how to wear a tie, taught me how to dress up, taught me how to shake hands, taught me how to introduce myself. We also did a number of very large projects in the community, and as a member of Blue Key, you got to chair one of those and be responsible for that, and it taught you teamwork, and it taught you how to count money and make sure that the project came off well, and that sort of thing. It was a very, very good experience for me, and the individuals that I was with in that group are still good friends of mine. We still contact each other. I got an email from one last week who had seen my picture on the invitation to this event and pinged me, and Blue Key was a great experience for me. The Office of the President. The last 2.5 years I was here, I worked for Dr. Bill Schulte over in the Office of the President, and that, along with my Blue Key training, sure meant a lot to me. You know, again, it was just polishing me up just a little more, and a little more, and a little more. One thing that does come in mind, it was my first experience with this, but at the time, last year I was there, I was working half-time for Dr. Schulte in the President's office. I was Vice President of Blue Key National Honor Fraternity, which carried a significant amount of work with it. And I was trying to finish my master's in 1.5 years. So Dr. Schulte calls me in and asks me to sit down, and he says, you know, you're not getting your hours in here, man. And he said that it's a problem for me. You got to put in your time here. And that was the first time as a professional somebody had ever sat me down and said, you know what, you got to pick it up a little bit, man. And while it was very uncomfortable at the time, it was a great learning experience for me, and I redoubled my efforts and of course turned that around and got back in. And Dr. Schulte was a great, great mentor of mine, and we became very close. And he took Nan and I up to Kansas City for a concert one time, and just was a very, very good guy to me. He also taught me the value of doing good work at an executive level. Dr. Schulte was in charge of keeping all the statistics for the university at that time, and he taught me that you know, if you put a number down, your name's behind it. Make sure the number's solid, man. Okay. And of course, this was his profession, and I picked that up from him, and you know what? It's been valuable to me, and it's been something that I've taken away from the university. Learning to love learning. I can remember in my junior year, very distinctly, working on my homework up in my room above 708 Peyton, above the porch there. And, I had a desk right in front of the window, and I would open the window when the weather was nice, and the breeze would come in, and I would sit there and study, and I might study till 1 or 2 in the morning. And I remember going into that year, I was up there studying, and I was reading this book, and all of a sudden the words just jumped off the page to me. And you know, I realized I'm really enjoying this. I'm just gobbling this up. I love this. And, you know, I was an okay student before then, but something clicked on me doing my homework here, and I learned to love it, and I learned to love that learning and that information and expanding my horizons. And you know, I've been a voracious reader ever since then. I've got a master's here from Emporia State. I also have another master's from KU. And I'm just an avid reader. If you look at my office at home, it's filled with books. And I'm not a novel reader. I like to read business books and self-improvement books and some spiritual reading that will help support that piece of me. But I felt like I learned that at Emporia State. It was then, too, that I was really asking questions and getting more out of my professors at school. But I left Emporia State with that, and you know, that's been something that's been very valuable to me always, or since then. And you know, even as I've run my company, I still continue to learn. I still continue to try and innovate and grow as a person and as an individual. And I feel like I got that here. Okay, I was graduating with my master's degree, and it was the end of the ceremonies, and it was like all graduation ceremonies. We were celebrating and going and saying goodbye to the instructors and the people that meant most to us. And so it was a very festive atmosphere, and we were having a big party at 708 Peyton, by the way, and we had cars parked up and down Peyton Street for that. But I saw an old professor of mine. His name was Gabe Naccarato. And don't know how many of you crossed paths with Gabe. But I took business law from Gabe Naccarato. And I saw him as the crowd was breaking up, and I went over to say goodbye to him. Gabe Naccarato had been particularly kind to me. He taught business law, and it was a very challenging course, particularly at a master's level, and you had to memorize case law and that sort of thing. And Emporia State went to a business school, and you had to take comprehensives to get out of the business school, and part of that was business law, and it was very, very challenging. I would go to him and say, you know, I'm really struggling with this, and he'd say, well, come in. He would shut the door, and he'd spend as much time with me as it took for me to get it for the test. And even on my comprehensives, so they put out the questions for your comprehensives, and you pick out, or the areas that you pick out that you want. And I went in and told him, and I said, Gabe, I'm really nervous about these comprehensives. I don't think I can pass your portion of it. And he said, well, come in and sit down. And so I did. And I'll bet he spent 5 hours with me. And he said, look, it's not that hard. Let's talk about some possibilities and what you might see on your comprehensives and how you would answer this. So we went through the answers, and he spent a substantial amount of time with me. And I breezed in, took my comprehensives, took my business law piece of my comprehensives, and passed. And I just never will forget his kindness. Well, at these graduation ceremonies, I was running over to him. I said, Gabe, thanks so much. You have been so kind to me. I can't thank you enough. And here's what he did. He took my hand, he shook my hand, and he said, son, what you need to do now is forget that you have that paper in your hand. And he said, you need to go out and make a living like everybody else, and only then will you realize the value of your education. And so that's what I did. Left here and went out, started working. Gosh, the first, I guess 5 years Dan and I were married, I worked 7 days a week. I'd just work it, and didn't put on a lot of airs about my master's degree. And it's funny, I'm in the executive recruitment business. I'll tell you that about that here in a few minutes. But I get a lot of individuals that call me and want to talk to me about their careers. And a lot of them are new grads, and I get grads from Harvard and from Duke and from Stanford, from all over the country. And what they'll tell me is they'll say, I just graduated with my MBA from Wharton. And the first thing that I always think about is what Gabe told me. I've never told him that. I always think, you know what? You need to forget about that MBA from Wharton. You need to go out and make a living like everybody else. And that's when you'll realize the value of it. A lot of guys don't do that though, man. They don't do that. They wear that as a badge of honor, and they believe that they're owed a certain level in society because they own that degree. And this advice from Gabe Naccarato, very important to me. Stayed with me ever since. So I go back to Kansas City and I start working. Today, I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer at B.E. Smith. The slide's not very clear, but we have 3 products. We have executive search, And essentially what we'll do is we'll go into hospitals and we'll recruit their hospital CEOs for them. We'll also do their vice presidents of human resources, of finance, of patient services. So we do the CEOs and we do the vice presidents, and then my company also will do the directors. And we do many of the biggest jobs in the country. I'm very proud of our services. We have an excellent reputation. So large operating rooms in big university teaching hospitals will come to us and say, hey, go find us a new operating room director. We'll have hospital boards that come to us and they'll say, go find us a new CEO. And we'll do that. We'll go out, we'll do the search, and we'll screen the applicants, and then we'll recommend 2 or 3 and we'll put the deal together. It's been very successful. Each year, well, this year we'll do about 600 of those searches. That's a lot of them. Our second product is interim leadership. And this was something that I started after Dad left, and I got really lucky with it. And what I was figuring out as I was selling our executive searches is these leaders, hospital leaders, would come in and they would give notice, and they'd say, I'm going to be gone in 30 days. Well, the hospital, that could be a 6 or 8 month search to fill that job if it's a CEO. You know, a director of operating room nowadays for a big hospital, that might take you a year. And so what it was doing was leaving our clients in a lurch and being candid with them. Many of them would say, what are we supposed to do in the meantime? He's leaving in 30 days and it's going to take us 6 or 8 months. What are we going to do? So what I did was I started hiring these hospital leaders as they came available, and I would tell my clients, you know what, we'll send somebody in to manage your hospital. We'll take that for 6 months while we're doing the search. They will bring your hospital up to acceptable levels of service and quality and financially. So I started hiring those individuals and I started leasing them out. Well, that was a new business in our industry at the time. And now we have over 200 of those people out in the field managing hospitals, managing patient services departments, managing ORs, laboratories, pharmacies, radiology departments, all of them. So very large search firm, very large interim leadership firm. There's some people that have come behind us in interim leadership that have gotten into the business. Not nearly what we are. We take it to a whole new level. We also do consulting. Our consulting products sound like this. People know that we have these individuals that are employees of ours at B.E. Smith, and they will call and they'll say, you know, I don't know what to do with this hospital. This may be a board chair. Or it could be a CEO and says, you know what, I don't know what to do with this human resource department. I don't know if it's performing for me or if it's not. My board's asking me questions. Send one of your employees out and do an assessment, if you would. And so we didn't do consulting, got into consulting. Now it's a pretty good service line for us. And we use the same people that are in our interim leadership department to go out and do consulting. So we have 3 service lines. We have executive search, we have interim leadership, and we have consulting. This web page, by the way, is one of the most busy websites in healthcare. This website gets pinged many, many thousands of times every day. And I get reports on who's coming into our website, and how many pings we're getting, and who's looking at it. It's a very, very active place. So you don't just leave Emporia State and get into doing hospital CEO searches, right? On the far left, this is my dad. My dad left Emporia State and found his way into human resources. And Dad had a heart for that and was one of the best in the business. This picture here was when Dad was the Director of Human Resources at MD Anderson Hospital in Houston, Texas, which is arguably the top cancer facility in the country. He had 3 stints, 3 big stints, 10 years each, one at the University of Missouri Hospitals and Clinics as their Director of Human Resources. Then he went to MD Anderson as their Director of Human Resources. And then he moved back to Kansas, and he was the Director of Human Resources for the University of Kansas Medical Center. Big-time jobs in our industry, big-time jobs. Big university teaching medical centers, into research, into cutting-edge surgery, big emergency rooms that are treating all kinds of trauma. Well, Dad's dream was to be self-employed. And it went a bit further. He also wanted his kids involved in the business. And so Dad left KU Medical Center and he started B.E. Smith and he hung a sign. True story, he actually took a second mortgage out on his home to start B.E. Smith and get it going. When I was graduating with my MBA, Dad said, hey, why don't you come to work with me? And, we got to talking. I thought, I think I could really like that business. And I didn't even interview for other jobs. Even when I got invited, I moved home and I started working for Dad. And that's how I got into the business. This is our picture when I came to work with Dad. This picture on the left of him in MD Anderson Hospital, that was back in the 1960s. I graduated in '85, went to work for Dad, and this was the two of us. And we were plugging away. This picture on the right is me. They just took this recently for a new corporate brochure of ours. So you've got Dad, you've got Doug and Dad, and now Dad's retired, and it's Doug. Back in 1978, when Dad went into business for himself, this was his first conference. He was at the Kansas Hospital Association with his first display, and it was a blue carpeted display, and it had vinyl signs with Velcro on it. And I went to see him at this conference and took pictures and all of that, and I was so proud. But we'd make sure those signs were level and looked good at a distance and that sort of thing. And this was him out pressing the flesh with his new business. This was his first brochure, and it was a vanilla brochure. It was a trifold, okay? And that was our first brochure. This is what B.E. Smith looks like today. This booth in the middle, that's a $250,000 booth. It cost us $50,000 just to ship that booth and set it up. It's always a hub at a conference. So we send it to the big ones, ACHE, which is the Conference for Healthcare Executives. We send it to AONE, which is the American Organization for Nurse Executives. We send it to ASHRA, which is the American Society of Healthcare Human Resources. It goes to about 4 conferences a year, and we have 7 other booths that are always on the road. We also have a career center. That's the one up on the top left. And whenever I walk into this big one, I always think of taking that picture of Dad in his first booth. And this thing just, you can't hardly get through it during a conference now. And I sit back and I think about that. And then I think about his brochure. On the left, we have an advertising budget of about $2 million now at B.E. Smith. We run ads in the 5 major healthcare periodicals. Down at the bottom is our most recent brochure, and when I think back to Dad's trifold that we used to put in an envelope and mail out, and now I see our brochure now, gosh, just for the creative on it, the creative on it's $50,000. When Dad did his first brochure, he sat down and sketched it out and took it to a printer. On the right is white papers. We release 2 white papers a month on how to manage your hospital. This particular white paper is on quality of care in your hospital and bringing that up to industry standard or best practices. So from 1978 to 2011, it's been quite a journey. During that period, too, I will mention, our firm has always grown. Been very, very lucky with that. We had one year, 2008, where the recession hit our business and I lost 25% of it, okay? But other than that, and that was in 2008, and in 2009, started coming back. In 2010, we had it all back plus, and this year we're up 50%. So here's what the company looks like in 2011. We have an operating team of 8. I'm the president and chief executive officer of B.E. Smith. I have a chief operating officer, and then I have 6 senior vice presidents. We have 300 employees that work there, and we have revenues in excess of $60 million. So it's been a good run. As I think back on it, and I think about Dad and I and how we were working to grow that firm, a lot of what's in that firm is what we learned here at Emporia State. One, to reach to a higher power. I can tell you I have a payroll every week over $1 million at B.E. Smith. Yeah, that's way beyond me as an individual. So I find myself doing the same thing. Lord, give me strength. Give me strength. And I got that here in Emporia State. And the humility, you know what we do in Emporia State? Or what we do at B.E. Smith? We get up and go to work. That's all we do. And if you want to find yourself with a job at B.E. Smith and you want to keep that job, you're going to come in and you're going to be a humble person. And you're going to say please and thank you and good morning and good afternoon. And that's how you're going to make it at my company. That's all we'll take. And I feel like I learned that here in Emporia State. And the learning and the love of learning, I got that here. I tell you what, I meet with my vice presidents every quarter and I ask them, how well read are you? What are you doing to push this company forward? How are you beating your competition? What are you doing to innovate? And I feel like I've taken that back to our company and I've instilled that in B.E. Smith. And it's made a big difference. Not sure what happened to that slide. That's Modern Healthcare, which is the biggest magazine in healthcare right now. This year, listed B.E. Smith as the #1 search firm in healthcare. #1. It's funny too because I can remember chasing other companies. No, I want to be like them. I want to be better than them. I want to work my way up. You know, we weren't on the list for years and years and years, and now we're #1. And it's a different feeling because now I know others are saying, no, we're going to catch them. We're going to catch them, and what they're doing, we're going to be better. Okay, before I close, being in healthcare, I can't close without at least mentioning this. And we have a senator in the audience who's going to know a whole lot more about healthcare and the healthcare struggles this country is going through right now than I am. But I will tell you this. I never get a presentation without at least mentioning this. The United States has the most expensive healthcare in the world, right? Per person, based on GDP, it's the most expensive healthcare in the world. For many years, it was the best healthcare in the world. Yeah, it's not anymore. In fact, we rank dead last in a lot of categories. I had an instructor here named Rocky Hartzler. I don't know if you guys remember Rocky. He was a statistics teacher. And Rocky had this saying, and he would say it in class. I'll bet I've heard him say this 20 times. And he'd say, there's lies and there's damn lies, and then there's statistics. Well, it's that way with measuring healthcare, okay? Well, they didn't measure this right, they didn't measure that right. But there's two things that everybody measures the same. And that's infant mortality and life expectancy. And it's pretty hard to get those numbers wrong. And where are we at now with developed countries? Dead last, man. The sad part of it gets worse. The sad part of it is we're ranking dead last. And you know what? 16% of our population do not have health care insurance. 47 million people have no coverage. And really, truly, they're not entitled to come to our hospitals because they can't pay, man. So we have the most expensive health care in the world. We're ranked dead last. And we have 47 million people that really aren't entitled to use the system. Now, they still do. You know, it's against the law to turn those patients away. But are the numbers right there? I don't think so. You know, the 47 million people, too, that doesn't include the individuals that are underinsured. And you know what? If you have a deductible of $5,000, for most families, that's like not having any insurance. That's not the 16% I was talking about earlier. No, that goes way beyond that. And I haven't seen a figure that I can say is accurate for that. But it'd be very large. So my point to you is this. There's going to be a lot of change in our healthcare delivery system. A lot of change. I'm sure it's on your desk all the time. Whether you like healthcare reform or not, I'm not going to comment on, but there's going to be a lot of change. Just know, though, that we've got to find a better place. Don't know what that is, but we've got to find a better place. What would Jack Mal think of our healthcare system now? I don't know. But he'd probably think, no, we got to get back to work. This is me graduating with my master's degree, shaking John Visser's hand, Dr. Visser's hand, coming across the stage. Never underestimate how important this university is to the lives of the people that graduate. You know, in my position, God, I get treated like a king, better than I should. And I tell you, it's the lessons that I took away from Emporia State that have sustained me and made me the man that I am today. I was born here in Emporia State, not literally, but I did a lot of growing up here. And this is where I feel like my birthplace is. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming.